Welcome back to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm Robert Phoenix, and it is the 5th of September, Tuesday, and we have transited out of the Labor Day weekend, and we are now into the final weeks of summer, although typically Labor Day sparks the end of summer, but as we all know, it doesn't really truly end until the 22nd/23rd of September, and we've been talking about the 23rd of September on the show as it relates to biblical prophecy and revelation, and have gotten a lot of really powerful feedback on that show and the image of the lion above the virgin, which is spoken of in a number of blogs and YouTube videos, which also theoretically corresponds with the birth of Yeshua Emmanuel Sananda on the 11th of September and not the 25th of December, which we talked about again yesterday, just to get you up to speed in case you haven't been following the programs. Well, today we're going to talk about Burning Man and what happened at Burning Man over the weekend. And just to give you a little bit of background on the whole Burning Man scene, I was living in San Francisco in 1988, and I was working at a magazine called San Francisco Magazine. And we had a young guy that was staying in San Francisco, and he was interning with us, young British guy of superior peerage. Patrick was his name. I'll skip his last name. But Patrick was an interesting guy. I got to hang out with him quite a bit. Had a lot of fun with Patrick. Good dude. And one day he was on the beach in San Francisco, and it was, I believe, right around Memorial Day, if I'm not mistaken. And he found a bunch of men or people burning an effigy on the beach. And that was, if I'm not mistaken, the first actual burn for Burning Man. And Larry, the guy who has started Burning Man, he was trying to get over his wife or girlfriend, I forget which, leaving him at that time. And so he pulled out the old, hey, let's burn the Wicker Man trick in the occult textbook. And so he burnt an effigy of his sorrows and placed them inside of this man and set it on fire so he could be free, and free of his past and free of his suffering, tragedy, etc., etc., etc. And so it caught on. It was like, it was a very festive kind of moment in time, and people said, are you going to do it next year? You can do this again. And so he wound up doing it again. And this continued to happen on I think it might have been, was it Baker Beach in San Francisco? I think it happened maybe 2 years in a row or 3 at the most. And then all of a sudden they needed to find a new place because this thing had taken on a life of its own. And eventually what happened is they moved the event of Burning Man to Black Rock Desert, which is in a very remote part of Nevada. And this is where the modern day version of Burning Man now resides, and has resided for well over 3 decades now. And I went to my first burn. I've been to Burning Man 2 times, and the first time I went there was in 1994. And there were, I believe, at the most, I think 5,000 people there in 1994. Now the event is host to close to 50,000 people. And the scale and the scope and the magnitude of the event is completely and utterly changed. I'm going to read today, on today's show, an email from a good friend of mine who has some commentary on what happened in Burning Man over the weekend. And this is a person who's been deeply involved in the Burning Man culture and had a camp that they would set up every year, the camps are a very important part of Burning Man. To give you an idea about how important the camps are in terms of the entire experience, is that once you get to Burning Man, you don't pay for anything. I mean, you pay to get in. The ticket is not cheap. It used to be around $100, $150. I think it's much higher now. I don't keep up with the Burning Man prices, and it's much more difficult now to get a ticket. Back in the old days, they'd go on sale, you'd get one and or two or whatever, or you'd be a part of a camp and then you would get in. So the camps provide entertainment, they provide service, they provide food. I mean, people they've had in the past very wonderfully themed little camps. And once you get there, it's like Disneyland, it's like the Magic Kingdom. Except you don't have to pay for anything. So you can wander into a tiki bar in the middle of the desert, and they could be playing incredibly cheeky and kitschy lounge music, and they'd be serving up Mai Tais or daiquiris, and none of it comes out of your pocket. It's all part of the experience. It's all part of the community. You can wander upon a sushi restaurant in the middle of the desert, which I've done, and actually the sushi was quite good. I mean, yeah. Do you want to eat sushi in the desert? Well, at a certain point in time, at about 3 a.m., you're thinking, hey, sushi is not a bad idea here. Kind of interesting. So there's that, and there's more. There's the incredible art cars and art exhibits, some of which are tremendous. I remember the first time that I went there. And remember, you've got to understand this thing is taking place. And now it's much more concentrated. When I first went to Burning Man, there was no perimeter. It was just the Black Rock Desert. So you could get in your car, you could travel 5, 6, 7 miles in your car in the Black Rock Desert, and the Burning Man camp would look like a small flickering light in the distance. And the scope and the magnitude wouldn't be able to be seen unless you got within, 10,000 feet of the camp, especially back then. So I'll never forget when the first time I was there. I remember this is 1994, and this guy had these test tubes, and he put these red LED lights. Now, back in 1994, an LED light was a big deal. Not everybody had LED lights, and they were red, and they would flash on and off, and he put them in about 20 different test tubes or so, maybe more, and he inserted those test tubes in the cracks in the desert. So when you approached this one area, what you saw this blinking and flashing grid-like pattern just emerging out of the desert floor, and it's like, wow, this is really kind of genius. And it was so simple that that it didn't take a lot to create something unique, and this guy had actually done that. And there was a lot of creativity around Burning Man. It was the kind of the birth of steampunk in some ways in American culture. Burning Man was a haven for the steampunk aesthetic, using old pieces of technology, computer chips, whatever, creating and recreating them into art and fashion and architecture. It was actually very brilliant back in the early days when I was there in '94. And I also saw, and this is just my experience, I don't know about anybody else, but I saw UFOs at Burning Man. And I'm not a big UFO guy, but I've seen them. I've seen them on more than one occasion. And at Burning Man, they were quite startling, to be quite honest with you. Because when I saw them, I was way out in the deep part of the playa, a place you can't get to anymore because of the perimeter. And when I was out there, and I was with a friend, and all of a sudden we saw these lights appear, and they danced around us. And trust me, there was nobody from Burning Man anywhere close to where we were. I mean, think about somebody be out there. Hey, let's wait for somebody to get in their car. Come on out here, and let's unleash these lights and freak them out. No, it wasn't that at all. But the freak out part was pretty real. So it was in 1994, and I had a pretty cool time. I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed my time there. And I didn't go back again until 2007. And boy, when I went back in 2007, it was a radically changed world. I mean, the scope of it was just... If you've never been, if you've never seen Burning Man, up until this weekend, believe it or not, I would have recommended it just so you can see it up close and personal. Because the magnitude of creativity and imagination, and I'm not going to get into a commentary about the depravity, at least not now in this sentence. But the scope and the magnitude of the creativity and imagination was mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. And what was happening, this is really around a big turning point around 2005, 2006, and that's when Silicon Valley really discovered Burning Man and decided and people started to create these really amazing kind of high-tech camps and charge to be in the camp. This is a big kind of pivot moment around, I think it's around 2005, 2006 in Burning Man. And the customized camps and the customized Burning Man experience. Well, you go there, you pay $5,000, $3,000. I don't know what the price is, but you get to stay in the camp. You get admission into Burning Man, and who knows what else you get? Maybe they provided you with recreational substances. I don't know. I was never part of those camps, but that became a big deal. And as time has gone on, since around 2005, 2006, and now here we are 10 years later, it has become almost the de facto or default kind of experience for Burning Man. Now, a lot of sculptures, a lot of serious pieces of art were brought into the desert, around 2005, 2006. Of course, they take them away. I mean, everything has to be completely removed from Burning Man. Everything. They have to leave the playa as they found it. And the breakdown of Burning Man can take weeks, up to a month, with people out there just putting things away, deconstructing the culture, picking up the debris. It's a huge undertaking. So we have the metastasizing of Burning Man, and where corporate culture has come in, and then celebrity culture descended upon Burning Man, the likes of Katy Perry and Paris Hilton and a whole host of other celebs that showed up at Burning Man, became a celebrity playground, and it was cool to be seen at Burning Man. So I saw in 2007 kind of the pivot of Burning Man. It was still pretty incredible, It was. I mean, just imagine that you get into a shark mobile. Yeah, it's a car that looks like a shark, and you can sit in the jaws of the shark and get picked up for a ride and travel across the Black Rock Desert at night in the jaws of Jaws. I mean, it's that kind of experience. I'll never forget the first time I saw their version of the Thunderdome. There was an actual Thunderdome that they'd created at Burning Man, and people would go in there and they'd Thunderdome it out. I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy. It's incredible, but it really pushed the limits of what you think people could do in the middle of nowhere. But I was sensing that there was a darkness creeping into Burning Man. And that darkness was growing and growing and growing exponentially. That a supernatural force, which was inherent in the event itself, had taken over and become the operating principle or the operating system of the event. Meaning that there was a larger entity involved. And I'll never forget the experience of, in 2007, of hitting the playa. It was palpable. I mean, you could just walk into that place and you could feel a different kind of energy. And it wasn't bad. I'm telling you, it wasn't bad. It was exciting. It was freeing. It was liberating. It was very seductive. It was very, very seductive. And but that was my last time, and I didn't have any desire to go back to Burning Man after that. And every time I go to an event like a Burning Man or some kind of event where I'm taken out of this culture and this time, and I coming back into this culture and this time is really hard. Really, really hard. I'll never forget in 2007 when I came back, I went almost immediately, because I got back on I think it was Labor Day, Monday morning, and I was married at the time, and it was not a big deal. It was like, yeah, you can go to Burning Man. Okay, great. And everything was cool. I just hung out with my friends, and my son was, I think he was 3. He was 3 then, and we took him to a carnival in downtown Oakland, and it was such a stark contrast to Burning Man. It was really difficult to be at that carnival. As much as I loved the kids, and the whole idea of bringing the kids and having a family event with the density was difficult, to say the least. It was like I was suffering a psychic case of the bends. Anyway, that was my last time, because I could feel that there was something going on there that wasn't as illuminating in the sense that you would want illumination, So that brings us to what happened this past weekend at Burning Man. And I want to read to you an email. And maybe I'll read the other email too. This is from a really good friend of mine. And I'm going to, this is somebody who is a Silicon Valley insider, has been a Silicon Valley insider for a very long time, and still is involved in Silicon Valley, albeit in a more, to some extent, limited capacity. I'll skip the personal part. She says, have you heard of the man who evaded 20 security and firefighters and ran into the fire at Burning Man and burned Saturday night? I was on my way there and a little voice told me to stay home. Boy, so here's the scene. There was on the burn on Saturday night. So they have, every year the man has a different visage. And every year there's a different theme at Burning Man. And I'm going to share with you some of this. And she says what's really creepy is that some religious right media foreshadowed this. So this is a link to a website called Right Wing Watch, a project of people for the American way. And the headline is, Kevin Swanson, Burning Man wants to bring back human sacrifice. This is from the 21st of August. On his radio show last week, right-wing pastor Kevin Swanson argued that the annual Burning Man festival is trying to bring back human sacrifice, but has been unable to do so only because of the influence of Christ on our legislators, who recognize that the practice is prohibited by Old Testament law, also known as Noahide law. The only way that we can defend a law, a civil law, against the worship of false gods by way of human sacrifice or animal sacrifice is by applying Old Testament law, Swanson said. We don't serve our foreign gods by human sacrifice or animal sacrifice simply because the Word of God doesn't allow for it. And as Christians, as a Christian worldview, as a Christian legislator, or as a Christian governor, I could not allow it in any given city or state because the Christian worldview only allows for a single sacrifice, and that's already been accomplished. By the way, if you don't think abortion is a human sacrifice, you are not looking at it from all angles. Okay? And look, that's your choice. It is your choice. I have been in the dark recesses of that choice. And trust me, it has very deep and very profound consequences. I'm just putting it out there. Swanson said that Burning Man is all about radical inclusion, which he insisted is just another name for radical polytheism and radical human sacrifice. This is what they're headed for. They want to bring back human sacrifice. Well, they got it. They got it. There's a guy who, there's video out there too, if you want to go onto YouTube. Richie from Boston has a video up. Richie from Boston. Hey, what's up, people? Hey, what's up, people? No, that's how it's done. Anyway, you can see the video. It's all over the internet now. It's from the periphery. The man is burning in 3 stages. It is ablaze, and this guy is determined to get into the burn as quickly as possible and have his life consumed by fire. And guess what happens? It does. It happens. So here's another tidbit. I never saw Burning Man as a satanic ritual until last year, when I saw increasing creepy things out there and fewer of the light, uplifting, or positive balances to the shadow side. People like Paris Hilton and Katy Perry started going. Last year, I swore I saw a man being escorted in a black car who looked like Obama. Burning Man seems like an Obama event. Why wouldn't he go? He would love Burning Man. You get to smoke all you want. There's plenty of hashish and copious amounts of other pharmacological delights that he could partake in. Maybe he could bring Malia with him, and she could get down to the Burning Man. This year, the all-over face covering mask was popular. So the all-over face covering mask. So I guess Antifa was in fashion on the playa. I wonder if to conceal very prominent individuals. You bet your ass. Burning Man has become the Bohemian Grove for hipsters. The ticket this year was an all-seeing eye over a candle flame shaped like an obelisk. And I see there it is. I see the ticket, and boy, it's clearly esoteric. There were 800 takeoffs a day at the airport. So she puts a link here. This is from the daily.co.uk, and this is what she's referring to. It looks like the site is really busy doing its thing. I'll come back to it. They burned an owl. They burned an owl. Let me see if I can get this one. Because that UK site is... don't just love it sometimes, the internet. Okay, more than 70,000 brave fierce dust storm at Burning Man. Strong winds descend on the famed festival in the Nevada desert. Burning Man participants braved the desert storm on the second day of the annual Burning Man. The highly anticipated art and music festival runs over 9 days from Sunday until September 4th. An estimated 70,000 people. It's up to 70,000 now. When I was there, it was 5,000. It's the first time. People are expected to attend the event this year in Black Rock Desert, Nevada. This year's theme is Radical Ritual, where participants are asked to create interactive rites, ritual processions, elaborate images, shrines, icons, temples, and visions. Well, it was a radical ritual. Somebody decided to toss themselves. Maybe they didn't decide. See, that's the whole deal, right? That maybe they were consumed by a spirit of desecration. Let's see what we got here. Boy, there are pictures, and the dust storms were very intense. Very, very intense. The airport, formerly known as 88NV, is built every year and averages as many as 800 takeoffs and landings a day before it's taken down completely. So they have their own airport. 800 takeoffs and landings in the Black Rock Desert, bringing people into, man, this whole theme with all the covered faces, it's like thoroughly dystopian. Never seen such a dystopian version of Burning Man before. Very intense. How about the owl piece? Let's see if we can find that. Hold on, let me see if I can get this owl thing here. Oh, it's the same link. But apparently they burned an owl in an effigy. How about, can you believe that, burning an owl? I mean, that's gotta just bring huge amounts of negative energy, and the ramifications of burning an owl at Burning Man boggle the mind. Let's see. It says celebs like Paris Hilton and Cara Delevingne had devil horns on their cars. So there's Paris Hilton. She's there at Burning Man, and she's got her RV with giant ram horns on it. She's parading around, looking like a goddess. Poppy Delevingne, Alex Israel, and Cara Delevingne. Who are these people? There's Paris Hilton, striking a pose on the Black Rock Desert. Katy Perry. Burning Man can't be Burning Man without Katy Perry. I do not know who Carly Kloss. I've heard of her. She's a celebrity. Here's a picture of her riding in a giant Hoover vacuum. You see, this is the magic. This is the magic of Burning Man in a lot of ways. I mean, here you are in a giant Hoover vacuum, and this thing is like created to scale, and you're cruising across the Black Rock Desert. Nina Agdal, she was at Burning Man. Gaia Matisse, I don't know who any of these people are. Diplo, the DJ, he's there. He was there. I know who that guy is. So there you go. There is your celebrity watch at Burning Man. Let me read a little more of this email. She says, by the way, it was really, really hard to get in this year. And a lot of older camps, like my brother's, were demoted or didn't get placed. My camp, I'm going to leave out the name, one of the few positive light and spiritual influences there, kept getting more remote placement, and last year has dissolved. Then this happens. This is the death of Joel Mitchell, who is the 41-year-old man who ran into the flaming effigy. It's an interesting name, Joel Mitchell. And then she went on to say, also really strange that the structure around the man looked like a UFO beaming him up when it was burned. It was lit and burned. And then she says that she was invited to go, but she didn't want to go, and probably a pretty good move to stay away from Burning Man this year. So what does that mean in terms of the bigger picture? And not to go too deeply into moralization, but it clearly feels like an event that is, at the very least, a very public manifestation and witnessing of a human sacrifice. Now, the organizers of Burning Man did not go in and say, hey, let's roast up a human this year, let's do it right. But actually what occurred was that something overcame this man and took a hold of his spirit and possessed him to break through a wall of 20 security guards who who had formed a phalanx around the man, the burning man, so that nobody can do what he did. And he managed to break through that wall. He was airlifted out and died. Could you imagine? Could you imagine what it would be like to have those final feelings? You know, that you're encased in a sarcophagus, a living sarcophagus of burned flesh all over your body, and all of a sudden racing back into your head is this conscious awareness of what you have done. If you get to that place and all of a sudden being completely and utterly, if they're conscious, remorseful. The gift of life. This is one of the paradoxes of the human experience. I mean, we have a gift of life. Now, we may be dwelling in hell at times, but it is the gift of life nonetheless. And the repercussions of abusing it to the point where it's extinguished either in a moment or a lifetime are significant. And it's a real paradox, total paradox. But it's really feeling like life is becoming, to some extent, cheaper. Cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. She also sent me a very interesting email about what's going on in Silicon Valley. She's a total insider, and it's fascinating. I'm not going to read this email. Maybe I'll read it tomorrow. And trust me, there's stuff in this email that will really give you kind of a bird's eye view as to what goes on in Silicon Valley, which has become the new Babylon. If you haven't figured it out, Hollywood's days are numbered. Look at what's happening with films. Look at what's happening with the summer film series. Terrible, worst summer film series in the history of Hollywood. They didn't even try. They just rolled out the sequels. Fast and Furious, Pirates of the Caribbean, Transformers, the big franchises, they just rolled them out. I guess Wonder Woman was the big hit. And it was such a social victory for Wonder Woman, portrayed by Gal Gadot, member of the IDF. Yeah, that's right. And some people believe that she's not even a gal. Her real name should be Guy Gadot. I don't have any comment on that, but we know that there is a lot of trickery going on with gender in the world, and it is one of the great inversion pranks taking place before our very eyes, making a mockery of our own experience. But Hollywood is done. So the new Hollywood, the new Babylon is north. It's in Silicon Valley. That's where it's all taking shape. That's where Google is planning on running the world. Smart cities, cyber cities, cyber surveillance, Google as God, running everything, thanks to Ray Kurzweil, animating the Matrix, the trans-dimensional spirit of technology. Sophia electrified, the digital goddess of wisdom embedded in each and every one of us, displacing our original spirit. We don't have to do anything. It's all inside of us, as some of my very smart and very switched on listeners remind me of all the time. It's all inside of you. And so I'm here as a focal point at times for a narrative, and sometimes it's personal, and sometimes it's transpersonal, but I am the filter, I am the transducer, I am the human radio station in some ways, the carrier of the experience, not in any kind of an egotistical sense, trust me. It just happens to be that I filter this stuff, and I've been doing it all my life. And so I get to do it here for you every day at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. On the North Korea front, things are moving right along. They're just moving right along. The details are not great. The next thing the United States is planning on doing is setting up trade embargoes with anybody doing trade with North Korea. We can't hurt them enough with sanctions directly. We'll hurt them indirectly with their trading partners. This is the way to force the trading partners to do something about North Korea. Can you imagine what would happen if there is an embargo on goods coming from China? Do you know how empty our stores will be? This is a really interesting dilemma. It's not even a dilemma. It's like China's become so embedded in our experience that if we decided that we didn't want to get anything from China, our stores would be empty. Tools, clothes, sporting goods, technology, you name it. You name it. China has its fingerprints in everything. Apples, apple juice. What about Smithfield, the pork company that China owns right here in the United States? Will we not do business with them? What about all the free trade zones that have been set up in the U.S. that China has occupied? These are tax-free trade zones. Are we not going to cross the Bay Bridge because China built it? And I don't know what kind of service fees they've got moving forward. Are they going to close the Bay Bridge down because it has Chinese fingerprints all over it? And China's not happy. They depend on us Americans buying a lot of their shit because their people don't buy as much shit as we do. They build cities that are vacant, unoccupied. The metropolis of ghosts, that's what they have. But China is far too busy building infrastructure in places like Africa, where they can extract all those very, very precious rare earth minerals so that they can get them and sell them to the cell phone companies so we can put those little pieces of coltan inside of our cell phones so we can communicate. But no, this is what Trump is proposing in his administration. So here we are. We're at the 5th of September, and the North Korea issue is heating up. It is not going away. It is not being diffused by any kind of real diplomatic talk. It's just met with more bluster, more threat, more bluster, escalation, more threat, more bluster, tension, escalation, and all of a sudden it will pop. And it's a pop that you don't really want to be a part of. It just doesn't end well. It just can't. Can't. So, if you are of the spiritual persuasion, I would urge you to pray, and I would urge you to meditate, and I would urge you to invoke the spirit of Sananda, Yeshua, Emmanuel. Invoke that spirit and get it into real time here so that we can diffuse this North Korea garbage so that cooler, wiser, more spiritual heads prevail. Unfortunately, on the world stage, there doesn't seem to be any of that. The leaders of the so-called free world are all compromised, bought, paid for. Insiders of rings of despicable activity, and you know what I'm talking about. They're all in it, hand in hand, up to their third eyes, so deep into it that each and every one of them is compromised, and they cannot and will not turn on one another. Because if they do, that is the end. It is the end of their dark hegemony, so they're pledged to secrecy. But amidst us, the masses. There's still hope. There's still a spark and a glimmer of light in people that have consciousness and care. There's still a spark and hope and a glimmer of light for people that can hold a spiritual space, a divine space, honoring that essence of God within. And in our time, it becomes more difficult to do that. Much more difficult to do that than in any other time in history. And it has everything to do with the artificial influences in our environment. From the 4G and the 5G networks to the genetically modified foods we consume, to the entertainment and the fog and the haze of the perpetual electronic distraction, the fog of faith gets thicker and thicker and thicker. This is the way it is. So it takes more work to stay in touch with it, keep that flame alive. But you know what? I believe in you. I believe in the people listening to the show. All 300 of you, you have it within you. You have it within you in order to hold that space. Hold that space. All right, let's put a wrap on today's show. You've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm Robert Phoenix. And I'll be back here tomorrow, 24 hours from today. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible.